Well, next up on the podcast, out of the thumb, Brady Beedon, broadcaster for GetStuckOnSports.com. And first of all, welcome, Brady. And I just wanted to tell you, I always enjoy running into you or Dennis, calling games. I know last time we saw each other, you were blasting out my microphone calling the Cronham Marine City game. But you do a
I
great
am a
job
little
over there.
loud. I do apologize for that. I've never been a quiet one.
Well, that's all right.
I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. It is always a blast when we run into you.
Yeah, of course. Now, my question just out of the gate, I really like what you guys do. Could you give us a little breakdown on Get Stuck on Sports? I understand the name is a takeoff on Dennis's last name, but tell us how that all started and where you're going with it.
So GetStuckOnSports.com, it's basically online radio for high school sports in what we call the Blue Water area. Think St. Clairs County, most of Sanilac County. We dip into a little bit of Lapeer County with Emily City and North Branch over there, and a bit of northern Macomb. We broadcast online on our website audio streams of football, boys and girls basketball, hockey, baseball, and softball.
Wow!
And basically, between Dennis and I, we double team it, so we go to two different places. Over the last 3 years, we have broadcasted over 800 games.
Wow.
So along with the games, we do a podcast 3 times a week, which is basically just an hour show, talk show style of just area high school athletics. So we'll talk about what's happening, what we think is going to happen, and we try to, give the coverage to the kids in that area that need it and deserve it, because there used to be a lot of coverage over here. It's fallen off, as I think it has a lot of places for high school. So that's what we try to do, is give friends, family, the athletes an opportunity to get the coverage, listen to your kids' games live, and also just be able to be involved with the community. Maybe you don't have a kid that plays, but you want to check in with how your alma mater is doing. I like to think we give an avenue for that as well.
No, that's awesome to hear, because I think the three of us can really appreciate that. We're all from Corona, a little bit of a smaller community, and Ted called games for over 30 years, mostly calling probably those smaller communities that you're talking about.
Right.
Obviously followed a lot of them to the Silver Dome and then Ford Field. So, maybe got a bigger stage at some point in the season. But I really appreciate exactly what you said, given those smaller communities and players who aren't going to end up on, at a MAC school or a Big Ten school or something like that, giving them that spotlight a little bit. We had Tyler Graham on last week. He runs the Twitter page at Mish FB Frenzy. And He basically said the same thing. He's from the Alma area, and he basically said the same thing. He wanted one place where people can go and see scores, highlights, whatever. But he wanted to try and get a little shine for the kids who don't get it, not the 5-star recruits, out of Detroit and Grand Rapids and stuff like that. So it's a long-winded way for me to say I think that's really cool that you guys are trying to do that. What's the background? What's your guys' background? I mean, obviously probably sports interest,
right?
But what kind of got you into this?
My partner Dennis Stuckey, he for 25 years worked at the local radio station in Port Huron. He was the voice of any professional hockey team that went through Port Huron, starting with the Border Cats back in, I think, 1996. As recently as he was the voice of the Prowlers, and I think his last year he did it was 2017 or somewhere in that range. So he has a lot of range there. And when it wasn't hockey season for the radio station, he'd do high school football and some other sports, just depending on what it was. So he was doing that for a long time. And I graduated from college in December of 2019. So we all know what happened about 3 months later.
Right.
Once everything shut down, cuts were made in every industry everywhere. And one of the first things to go over at his radio station was the sports department. And he was the sports department. He was the only guy there in charge of sports. So we met. It might have been the day he got let go or the day after. And we're just talking. We're like, so who the hell is going to do high school sports? And we're like, well, we can do it. I mean, we think we can figure it out. The two of us can make it happen. And we know the area, and we know we can at least make the broadcast side sound professional and quality. the question was all the back end stuff, the not so fun stuff, the business side. But
sales.
So we cobbled that all together, and the day he got our business license in the mail in 2020 was the day they shut down the high school football. So like the third day of training camp, if you remember, the kids got out. It was like the first day with pads on, and they shut it down. So we kind of put it on pause, and we're like, all right, maybe we'll just wait till basketball season and try to start fresh. Maybe we wait a whole year and start in the 2021 season. Obviously, we were lucky enough to get started, and we basically put everything together in just under 2 weeks. I was on a golf course when they announced that some of the COVID restrictions had lifted. I was on the tee box when I found out about it. By the time we got to the green, high school football was announced to come back. So for about 2 weeks, we were everything going. We were able to cobble together a few sponsors before the first football game. And, well, we've made it last through 3 full seasons, and we're about to start number 4. So we're very lucky and very appreciative of all the support we've gotten to get to this point.
Awesome.
That's freaking awesome. Yeah, it really is. It's a really cool story. I mean, and we're just to talk about the worst possible time to be getting into it, but I'm glad you guys stuck with it. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know too much about the Thumb area when it comes to, high school football. Mm-hmm. Marine City is obviously a great program that's at Ford Field, every so many years. Who are some teams that we should be maybe on the lookout for this year that could maybe make a deep run in the playoffs? Who are the top teams in that area?
Well, Marine City is obviously always going to be near the top. I mean, for 20 years, they have been the standard of the Blue Water area, the lower part of the Thumb. There's some Port Huron and Port Huron Northern are 2 really good programs that have had a lot of success. The problem is every year they make the playoffs, they seem that De La Salle is in their district. So if they win that game, you're thinking, all right, they can win the whole dang thing, but we all know what success De La Salle has had. So the playoff success hasn't been there, but that's been mostly because that's the team they've run into. I mean, go on the Michigan Historical Site and just look at their playoffs. It's usually either they knock each other out and the winner of that loses to De La Salle. So they're 2 really talented programs that have a lot of athletes over there that just can't quite get to that next De La Salle level. Not a lot of programs can. And then the BWAC always seems to have a couple teams come out. Cros-Lex has been on a really good run. They have some phenomenal players there right now. A little close to you guys, North Branch. They're going through a coaching change, but they've had a really nice run. Armada is starting to really build up a program. They were a program that didn't really have a lot of life, and then Kyle Rowley came. His dad, Bud Rowley, coached at Oxford for all those years. He's in Armada. And they won their first conference title in 20 years. They've won a playoff game 2 years ago, and they're looking to take that next step and become what Marine City is. In fact, week 1 last year, Armada knocked off Marine City. It was Marine City's first loss at home, and I think in 4 years. And now week 1 this year is the rematch in Armada, so I'm really excited for that one.
Well, like I told you, we're all over the place with questions. I'm going to go back to a little bit on the business end. You guys are putting out a ton of content out there. Right. Is this your full-time gig? Is this part-time and you're just spending all this extra time doing it? Tell us how it all works.
So as anyone in the broadcast industry knows, unless you hit it big, you're going to have your hand in a few different areas. Mm-hmm. I'd say this is the main course for me. This is what I do 5-6 days a week. And Dennis has been really good letting me supplement other things. But we've been lucky enough that through getting advertisers, whether it's on our live streams or on our podcast, have been able to keep this going and keep it at least somewhat financially viable for 3 seasons. But I think this past tax season, I had 4 tax forms to turn in. And this coming one, I think I'll have 6 or 7. So it's a little bit of other things. I'm wearing actually the Motor City Rockers shirt. I work for that hockey team out of Fraser. They're in the FPHL, the same one that's in Port Huron with the Prowlers. I do color commentary for Wayne State football on the radio. I do that with Sean Belesian. St. Clair County Community College, I do volleyball, boys and girls basketball stuff there for them during the fall and winter. I mentioned Wayne State. And then the USPBL. This summer was something new I added down at Jimmy John's Field in Utica. I've been broadcasting for them as well. So it's a little bit of everything. And then you add some freelance things here and there, or tournaments coming in, something like that. So I'll try to add that on the plate. But yeah, Get Stuck on Sports is my main thing I do. But Dennis has been very gracious. He understands what it's like to be a young broadcaster trying to get as much exposure as possible. So he's been very gracious. Hey, if I have to miss a Friday night game to do a Rockers game or miss something to do SC4, he's very understanding about that.
Well, I think it's very cool. We've talked about it to other guests before about the hustle. And, you might not be making a full-time living at Get Stuck on Sports, but you're making a full-time living on sports, which is very cool.
Yeah,
right. I was lucky enough between my parents having foresight and only having one kid and getting a scholarship to play at Wayne State that I was able to graduate debt-free. Awesome. So I could take a little bit of a risk. If I wasn't as lucky and my parents didn't have as much foresight to help save up, that maybe I would have had to have a side gig and I'd be working at a food place or something during the day, trying to make a little extra money to make those student loan payments. But luckily enough, I was just blessed to be in a position where I could kind of take a risk. And I understand that not everyone in my position could have taken that risk. So I always try to keep a little perspective with that as well.
Yep. Yeah, and as all of us know, because we work in different areas and levels of this industry, to an extent, you especially starting out in the business, you can't say no to anything.
Right.
You almost basically, you have to be a yes man. I mean, unless, like you said, unless you've got a bunch of other side businesses or you won the lotto, so you're not really hurting for money or something like that. Like, you got to kind of say yes to a lot of stuff until you really find your niche. Kind of similar to my previous question, I think the industry has changed a lot. I think all of us still agree that there's still, I know Ted definitely, he's kind of easing out of, semi-retired is what we always say with Ted, easing out of the radio business, but there's still so much value. I think all of us agree, maybe not everyone agrees, but so much value in radio sports cover, whether it's online, whether it's on a website, it's still radio, or on, an over-the-air traditional radio station. There's still so much value in covering these sports because a lot of people want it. I mean, yeah, maybe Michigan isn't Ohio or Texas or Florida with high school football. People in Michigan love their high school football and basketball and some other sports. They want to listen to their teams when they're going on an away, game or something like that. Is that your passion? Like, is that what you want to do? Or are you, do you want to stay giving these smaller athletes the shine like you were talking about? Or are you looking for, the quote unquote bigger and better things?
Well, that's the internal battle because, you fall in love with the stories of some of these kids. Like this past season, we were lucky enough to cover Mr. Basketball, Tyler Jamison at Port Huron Northern. And I'll be honest. Yeah, I applied to move on to bigger and better things. I've had interviews before and I'm trying to add as much to my plate as possible before I realize I have to cut some loose. Hasn't gotten to that point yet, but it's going to be a tough decision if and when it does happen. And I think back to, I heard a conversation with one of my coaches at Wayne State. He left to go to another spot. And he basically just said, there's never the perfect time to leave. There's never going to be this Hollywood transition where one chapter comes to a close and you're ready to ride off into the sunset. I know I'm going to have to leave something behind. I hope I can make it a clean transition if and when I do move on to something else. But it's going to be tough leaving a lot of these athletes and schools behind because if Get Stuck on Sports, whenever it does end, whether it's hopefully not within a year or 10 years, there might not be the coverage there is. And that will hurt a little bit to know I'm leaving behind some of these kids, and whether they know it or not, and I'm sure you guys know when you start following them, is you get emotionally invested in them. Like I've done games for schools I had no connection to. I can think of Algonac softball last year lost a heartbreaker to Millington in the semifinals, and I left that place, and I had that same kick in the gut feeling that I've had for my own teams, whether I'm watching Detroit sports or when I played. And yeah, so that emotional connection will always be there, and it will be tough if I ever move on to something that takes more of my time away.
When is there a certain game, in the thumb area or in your guys' coverage area that you would point to for an outsider that, hey, this game, this rivalry game, this stadium, this team, what game would you point to as like the best representation of football in the thumb area?
Port Huron High and Port Huron Northern is one of the best rivalries, not just in the area, but I'd argue in the state. If you've never been to Memorial Stadium, it is an awesome venue. It was built, I believe, in the late 1940s, and it's an all-concrete stadium. You have about, I'd say, 10 to 15 feet of sideline between the concrete stands and the actual sideline. So the fans are right on top of you. And both PH and Northern have had rich traditions of playing, of having good programs. But up until the last 5 years, it had been, all right, Northern had won 15 out of 19. And then PH won 12 out of 14. And it was kind of back and forth. But the last 5 years, there have been some absolutely talented players coming through that have been absolute dogfights. I think basically every game in the last 5 years has been a one-score game. And I think the most attended game was, I'm going to get this wrong, either 2018 or 19. It was Darius Slay came up to the game when he was still doing the high school stuff. Yeah. And I want to say there was about 8 to 10,000 people packed into that stadium. And it is one of the coolest games to be a part of and broadcast and just watch in the Blue Water Thumb area.
Little historical perspective from the 3 Point Podcast historian. That would be the old guy here. Memorial Stadium over there was built in the Franklin Roosevelt era. It was part of the New Deal. And that stadium in Owasso, Wilman Field, and at Cadillac, their field up there, which overlooks the lake, all three of them are classic concrete stadiums built in that era. So I just thought I'd throw that out to you.
I never knew that. That's a good factoid I'll have to bring up.
There you go. I bring something once in a while, Brady.
But it is, and it's, just the fan atmosphere. And when you get that place rocking, it is just it's crazy, and it's pretty cool. There's not a whole lot of rivalries like that.
That's awesome.
I'm looking at this field. It's incredible. Just real quick, Ted. Before
go ahead.
I'd never heard of it. Now that I'm looking at pictures, it does seem like a bucket list field in terms of the Michigan high school football scene. So that's awesome. I'm definitely gonna have to check out a game there.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to do at least a couple games that I know of up there, and it was a sweet setup for sure. Go back to your playing days. Tell us a little bit about high school, and then obviously you played at Wayne State. Tell us about that experience.
So high school, I was I played three main sports. I was football, basketball, baseball at Marysville High School. Final year did track, but when I went down to Wayne State, spent some time there. Was lucky enough to play all 4 years after my redshirt season in some capacity. So I was very happy with that. Spent a lot of great time there, and I fell in love with Wayne State. And it was kind of funny when I was being recruited and going through it. The summer before my senior year, we were talking with my family, like, you don't really want to spend the next 4 years in Detroit, do you? I'm like, nah. And then I went down there, looked through it. It is awesome, and it has only gotten better since I've been there. I'm actually jealous of the kids going through there now. That Midtown area is incredible. The field house, all the new dorms and everything on there. It's an awesome experience. But going to Wayne State, playing there was a lot of fun. I got to play with some very talented guys. Played with Anthony Pittman. His locker was right across from me, current Detroit Lion. So that's always one I like to name drop when I can. And luckily enough, my final game there was when we beat Grand Valley in Allendale for the first time in 35 years, I believe. Yeah. That was a very fun night.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I remember. So I graduated from Grand Valley in 2008. I was there pretty much during the height of Grand Valley's reign over D2 football. Jared's a Grand Valley alum also.
Yep.
more recent than me.
One
But
of the
I remember
guys
hearing
over
about
here
that Wayne State run. I remember hearing about that.
from Port Huron, Terry Mitchell was a Port Huron product, and I know he was there when they won national championships. So he was one of the guys instrumental in that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I got
to be on
one
that campus.
What was it like? I mean, we went to Grand Valley, but Tony Anise is a Corona grad, so we're all big kind of Ferris State guys. What was it like having to go against him for 4 years, and what would you expect from a Ferris State team? As a firsthand perspective.
Well, they always have the best athletes. It seems like they find guys out of nowhere. I mean, who offers a lacrosse player and gets him to become a stud? Like that's
an NFL player.
They always had dudes and they always had athletes, and he was a really good X's and O's coach. And yeah, unfortunately, we've had to deal with it. We almost shocked them 1 year, but yeah, they're just a really talented team. They just have more dudes than anyone else, it always seems like. And right now it's an arms race on the west side of the state between Grand Valley and Ferris State. Unfortunate for my Wayne State team that they're in a conference with basically the number 1 and number 2 program in the country. And it's you're going to have two absolute battles. It's like if you had Alabama and Ohio State seemingly in your conference every year, automatically right there.
Yeah.
But Wayne State has a little bit of buzz right now. I mean, Tyrone Wheatley, the new head coach. What do you think that's going to look like, coming up this fall? I feel like the GLIAC, I mean, with all the different coaches that have come from Ferris, kind of the inner rivalries there, Tyrone Wheatley at Wayne State. I mean, I think it's going to be a really fun season.
Everyone is just kind of up in the air because it was such a weird end to the Paul Winters era there that Tyrone Wheatley just kind of been very quietly doing his thing. Not a lot of keeps everything kind of close to the vest. So I might know a little bit, but not more than anyone else knows. I know there's dudes on that team, but again, I know he's going to be a name. And I know when he goes into living rooms, hey, dad's going to know who Tyrone Wheatley is. Right. That's going to be the appeal, that when he talks to someone's son is that their dad's going to at least have some name recognition. Mom and dad will know who he is. So I hope that helps with the recruiting side, but who knows? Because I haven't had a chance to meet all the assistant coaches, and you guys know that who you surround yourself with is as important as who you are as a coach. I have a general idea of what type of offense and defense they might run, but I'm going to be as interested as anyone in the next coming months or so, or weeks, I guess now, to see what Wayne State will look like when they kick off. And they open up at Slippery Rock, who is usually one of the better teams in D2. So it's not going to be an easy schedule for Coach Wheatley in his inaugural campaign.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it's all about, for head coaches, who you surround yourself with. Jared mentioned Coach Anise and his coaching tree. We've had Ryan Brady on, who's the head coach over at Saginaw Valley, came from that coaching tree. So, yes, Tyrone Wheatley has that name, especially in that area, but it's all going to come down to, can he be, a strong head coach? I think it's similar to maybe Coach Prime, Deion Sanders at Colorado. Sure, he's going to get some big recruits, probably some big transfers, but it's going to come down to, can you coach in big time D1 football? So I think that, maybe similar with Tyrone Wheatley. Coming up, we're talking about high school football is right around the corner. We do a show. We've done it for 5 or 6 years now. The Prep Pigskin Preview is what we call it. Dennis has been our guest from your area on, so maybe you guys can thumb wrestle over who does it for us this year. But you already gave us some teams to look out for. One thing we always look for in that preview show. Give us, maybe 3 or 4 players that our listeners should know about from your area.
Well, one guy off the top of my head, and I think he's going to be near the top of everyone's list. He's from Croslex. His name, Belly Groppy. He is a running back, and he is a dude. He missed, I think, 3.5 games last year and still rushed for over 1,000 yards. He was kind of the in case of emergency. Our joke would be, hey, if Croslex didn't know what to do, hit the belly button, and something good will happen. And when he was in games and they lost, wasn't because of the offense. He was a dynamic running back. And with a coaching change going on there, I think they'll, at least early in the season, rely on him a lot to kind of get their footing, to know, all right, we have this stud behind in the backfield. He will be someone to look out for. Another one from Port Huron, Gavin Troy. He's one that he plays both sides of the ball, and if his body would let him, because he's battled some injuries, he'd be at linebacker all the time. He'd be at running back all the time. And he was, I believe, our runner-up player of the year last year. He comes back for his senior season. He's just a dude. He's a football guy. It seems like he's always in the weight room and a guy like that. But we had a lot of seniors last year in the Blue Water area. So we're looking to kind of see who that next crop is. I mean, you guys know every year by week 3, you go, I had no idea who this kid is. And then puberty hit him like a freight train in the offseason. And now he's one of the best guys. We are going to have a lot of big offensive linemen. I know they don't get a lot of love in right. shows like this just because it's hard to quantify. And when you're doing a game, you can't watch the linemen play. But there's some pretty big guys all around the area that I think are going to make some running backs' lives a lot easier. I know North Branch, I believe he's just a sophomore. Bickle is his name. I think he already has a central offer. The kid from Marysville, Troy Kaza, I think he's 6'6", 285 right now as a junior. So he's the guys. There's a few others that I'm missing, but guys that when you show up to the field, you go, I think that guy's a good football player, and I just saw him walk out of the locker room.
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. I'll tell you what, appreciate the time, Brady. This has been a blast. We love talking high school sports. Like Matt said, flip a coin or whatever for which one of you join us on our preview show, all right? But tell our listeners, we'll share away from our end. Tell our listeners the best spot to catch up with you, because I know they're going to want to stay on top of what you got going on.
So for everything we do, our main hub is Twitter. It's at @G_StuckOnSports. We'll put out every time we have a new podcast. We'll let you know what all our games are. And during our games, we tweet out live updates. So even if you're a fan for someone maybe in the Flint area or not necessarily in St. Clair County, if your school plays in there, we'll give updates. And if you're playing up here, you might be able to catch a few games. I know there's some random teams we always end up doing 2 or 3 times. Like I think L'Anse Creuse North, the team we don't cover, I think we do 2 times just because they play at Memorial Stadium twice. So even if you're not directly in the area, you can still catch up and at least listen to the games live. We're also on Facebook, but if you just go to getstuckonsports.com, it's a very simple website. Our players are right there. We have a link to our live streams. We just use Mixler, so you just hit play for all the grandma and grandpas. Made it as simple as possible to use. And we also archive our game. So if you see us at a game that maybe you didn't know we'd be at, you can go back and listen to it after the fact too.
Awesome. Well, and again, thanks for joining us tonight. It's been a lot of fun, Brady. We'll catch up with you down the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Success Group Mortgage and Servicing is Shiawassee County's only licensed mortgage broker, lender, and servicer. That means you get exclusive products not found anywhere else. If you are looking to purchase a home or refinance a home in Florida, Hawaii, or Michigan, stop what you're doing and give Success Group Mortgage and Servicing a call. 989-720-4380. That's 989-720-4380.